Hello and welcome to another episode of Quick Tips. These are tips that you can apply to any painting situation. Today we're looking at dry brushing techniques. This is a super easy way to get some nice painting done very quickly. So to test this out, I've got some really old Lord of the Rings terrain that I had lying around in my basement somewhere. So we're starting off by snipping all the pieces out of the sprue. And to help disguise some of these seams, I'm actually putting some of the sprue in the Tamiya extra thin cement. And by doing this, it thickens up the glue and it actually covers up seams really nicely. You still get the plastic glue melting together the two pieces, but the extra thickness to the plastic helps fill in some of the gaps. And then I'm going to start off by spray painting the pieces black. And you can do this with an airbrush or a spray can. These are awkward shapes, so I'm doing my best here to hold these in place while I get them primed. And then once that's dry, I'm then hitting it with a neutral grey. I'm not worried about complete coverage, I just want to bring up the whole brightness. And once these are dry, you can see that we've got a nice base to start dry brushing. Okay, and over on the palette, I'm taking that same neutral grey and mixing in some white here, and just making a quick kind of ash grey colour. And for the dry brush itself, you want to use an old brush, something that's frayed. You can also use makeup brushes as well. And then once you have a bit of paint on the brush, I just want to show you how much you can actually dust off on a napkin here. You'll be surprised at how much paint the brush holds. So just keep dusting it on this napkin. And then as we take the model, you can still see that if I just lightly dust over the top, it still has some paint on the brush. Dry brushing is all about a mixture of pressure and the amount of paint that you have on your brush. So here I'm applying some medium pressure because there wasn't that much paint left on the brush. Also, consistency of the paint comes into play here. So you can see on the head, the paint was kind of wet on the brush still. I didn't dry off as much. So I'm applying some light pressure now just to get some of that paint off of the brush here. And that's because the paint is still fairly wet and I didn't dry as much off on the napkin. So to compensate for that, I'm just doing some light pressure. Once you get a feel for dry brushing, there's some things you can do with it. This is a technique called slap chop, and it's where I'm building up layers of dry brush to a pure white. So starting with a grey here, and just going all over. And then I'm building up to a light grey. And then hitting it with a white over the most extreme parts of the model. And then after you've got that gradient down, you can then use a contrast paint, which are semi-transparent, and it will actually inherit the brightness from the dry brushing underneath. So you can see on this shield that I've managed to tone the shield brown and get some shading and some very quick highlights in just a few coats of paint here. And another thing that works really well with dry brushing is glazing some colors underneath before you start dry brushing. So here I'm applying some water to the ruins, and then I've added a nice contrast paint brown here, and I'm just letting that dry over time. I'm also mixing in some Speedpaint Medium and some Camo Cloak, just to kind of give these ruins a nice mossy feel at the bottom of them. And then I'm taking a damp brush and just feathering those edges while it dries. And then once that's dry, you can then dry brush over the top as normal. And this helps add some variation to some of those more bigger, flatter surfaces, especially if you're dry brushing the same color over a large surface area. And then if your glaze color gets lost underneath, you can always then just glaze over the top using the same technique. If your paint and brush is too dry, you will get a chalky finish, and this looks pretty good on stone, but not so good on characters. And this is something you'll get a feel for the more you dry brush. But basically it's a mixture of keeping the paint wet, but less of it on your brush. And we can also apply this technique to any color. So here is some XV88, and I'm just applying it to the dirt. On these dirt mounds, there's no wash applied at all. It's all just the same dry brush with grey and then a contrast paint on top. Something that complements dry brushing really nicely is just some quick edge highlights in the brightest color. So here I'm going around with a white, and I'm just dabbing on a few glints and highlights on some of the raised surfaces. And lastly, to help hide the areas where the dirt meets the ruins, I'm using some pigment paint. And you can add water to this to make it into a paint consistency, or you can use it in the powder form here, and I'm just using this dry brush just to dab on some of that. It's a great way to blend the two colors here without having to dry brush a third color in between. And then lastly, I'm just gluing on a few tufts and lichen moss just to kind of add some variation to these bases. It also helps to add a pop of color as well. And there you go. And you can see I picked these neutral colors to work on any kind of battlefield. And it looks great with some Age of Sigmar models. And of course, it's kill team sized as well. And here I am using it with some Legion and some Star Wars Shatterpoint. And these are all models that I painted on the channel, so if you like the look of these, please check them out. And there you go, some ruins painted purely using dry brushing and glazing. A very simple and quick and easy technique, and it's got some really good results, and it's very fast as well, so you can get through a lot of stuff quickly. I've got more of these technique videos planned for the future, so if you like this content, please consider subscribing, like the video because that really helps me out as well, and comment below if you have any questions. I will see you in the next one.